Most people associate military innovation in the early Cold War with jet engines, nuclear deterrence, or armored divisions rolling across contested borders. The Korean War, in particular, is often framed as a proving ground for modern mechanized warfare. But that perspective overlooks a quieter reality, one that unfolded not in command tents or briefing rooms, but at the level of individual survival. In the extreme climates of the Korean Peninsula, especially during the brutal winters of 1950 and 1951, survival often depended less on advanced weaponry and more on something deceptively simple: fabric. There is a persistent misconception that modern synthetic gear has rendered earlier materials obsolete. Yet in Korea, many soldiers, particularly those drawing from surplus stocks of World War II equipment, relied on a piece of fabric technology that continues to outperform much of today's mass-produced survival gear. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't new, but it worked in ways that modern designs still struggle to replicate. What's often missed in discussions of the Korean War is how environmental exposure, rather than direct combat, shaped outcomes and forced adaptation at every level of military planning. The Korean winter forced a re-evaluation of what protection actually meant. By late 1950, United Nations forces advancing into North Korea encountered conditions that few had fully prepared for. Temperatures dropped as low as -30°C in some regions, particularly during the campaign near the Chosin Reservoir. Cold injuries, frostbite, trench foot, hypothermia, began to rival combat wounds in frequency. Standard-issue cold weather gear at the time was inconsistent. Some units had access to insulated boots and layered clothing systems, while others relied on equipment designed for the milder climates of Western Europe during World War II. Supply lines were stretched thin, and rapid advances left little time for logistical adjustments. In this context, older equipment, particularly multi-purpose fabric systems developed during World War II, became unexpectedly valuable. Among these was the military poncho, a simple but highly adaptable piece of gear made from tightly woven, water-resistant fabric. Unlike many modern tarps or lightweight rain covers, these ponchos were designed with durability, versatility, and field repairability in mind. They could function as rain protection, ground cover, shelter half, stretcher, or even improvised insulation when layered correctly. The key was not just the material itself, but the philosophy behind its design. World War II fabric design prioritized adaptability over specialization. During World War II, military planners operated under constraints that demanded flexibility. Equipment had to serve multiple roles because supply chains could not guarantee consistent resupply under combat conditions. As a result, items like ponchos were engineered to be as multifunctional as possible. The fabric used in these ponchos was typically a tightly woven cotton, treated with water-resistant coatings. While not fully waterproof by modern standards, it had a crucial advantage: breathability combined with durability. Modern synthetic tarps often excel at repelling water, but, they trap moisture inside, leading to condensation buildup. In cold environments, this trapped moisture can freeze, reducing insulation and increasing the risk of hypothermia. The older fabric systems allowed some moisture to escape, while still providing a barrier against wind and precipitation. In Korea, this distinction really mattered. Soldiers who used ponchos not just as rain gear, but as part of layered shelter systems, found that they could better manage moisture and maintain body heat. This was not a matter of comfort, it was a matter of survival. Improvised shelter systems became a critical survival skill. One of the less discussed aspects of the Korean War is how frequently soldiers had to construct shelters under extreme conditions, often with limited tools and materials. The terrain, mountainous, exposed, and lacking in natural cover, offered little protection from wind and cold. Here, the World War II poncho proved invaluable. Two ponchos could be snapped together to form a small tent. Combined with natural materials like branches or snow walls, they created shelters that significantly reduced wind exposure. More importantly, the fabric's weight and structure allowed it to hold shape under snow load better than many lightweight modern tarps. It did not flap excessively in high winds, reducing both heat loss and noise, an important consideration in combat zones. These improvised shelters were not comfortable, but they created microenvironments where body heat could be conserved. In conditions where exposure could become fatal within hours, that difference was decisive. Over time, these field adaptations informed broader military thinking about survival and shelter design. The limitations of modern gear reflect a shift in assumptions, not necessarily improvement. Modern survival gear often emphasizes portability and specialization. Ultralight tarps, synthetic bivy sacks, and compact tents are designed for convenience and efficiency under planned conditions. But they assume a level of predictability, access to dry storage, the ability to replace damaged items, and environments that do not push materials beyond their limits. The Korean War exposed the weaknesses of such assumptions. Equipment had to function after days of continuous use in sub-zero temperatures, with no guarantee of replacement. It had to be repairable in the field, often with minimal tools. WWII-era fabric systems met these requirements in ways that, honestly, many modern alternatives just do not. A tear in a cotton poncho could be stitched or patched with basic materials, but a damaged synthetic tarp often fails more catastrophically and is harder to repair without specialized supplies. Now, this is not to suggest that modern materials are inherently inferior, but rather that they are optimized for different conditions that do not always align with the realities of prolonged field exposure. Lessons from Korea influenced later military doctrine and survival training. The experiences of soldiers during the Korean War led to significant changes in how militaries approached cold weather operations and survival training. Greater emphasis was placed on layering systems, moisture management, and the construction of field-expedient shelters. Fabric technology also evolved, but not by abandoning the principles demonstrated during World War II. Instead, later designs sought to combine the durability and adaptability of earlier materials with the benefits of newer synthetics. Even today, military survival manuals continue to emphasize the importance of multi-use equipment and improvisation. The idea that a single item should serve multiple functions remains central to effective fieldcraft. The World War II poncho, in many ways, represents a benchmark against which newer designs are measured, not because it is technologically advanced, but because it embodies a set of priorities that remain relevant. What this overlooked detail reveals about warfare and human endurance. The story of a simple piece of fabric might seem minor in the broader context of a war defined by geopolitical tension and large-scale military operations, but it highlights a fundamental truth. Survival in war often depends on small, practical details rather than grand strategies alone. The Korean War, like many conflicts, was shaped not just by decisions made at the highest levels of command, but by the ability of individuals to adapt to conditions that defied planning. Equipment that could support that adaptation by being flexible, durable, and reliable had an outsized impact. This perspective challenges the tendency to equate progress with complexity. Sometimes, the most effective solutions are those that prioritize resilience over innovation for its own sake. Remembering these lessons matters more than it might seem. Understanding these overlooked aspects of the Korean War is not just an exercise in historical curiosity. It provides insight into how systems fail, how individuals respond, and how practical knowledge can bridge the gap between planning and reality. In a world that often assumes newer is better, these lessons serve as a reminder to examine the underlying assumptions behind the tools we rely on. Whether in military contexts or civilian preparedness, the principles demonstrated by something as simple as a World War II poncho remain relevant. They speak to a broader continuity in human experience, one where survival depends on adaptability, resourcefulness, and an honest understanding of the environment. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing to History Vault for more in-depth explorations of the details that shape history in ways we often overlook. And share this video with others who appreciate the deeper layers behind familiar stories.